Okay, thank you for bearing with us. We'll have a few people coming in onto the call right now, so we'll just give it 30 seconds. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for bearing with us there. I'm Craig Stanley, and I'm one of the National Business Development Managers at CHU, and looking forward to presenting to you today with Alison Bell. Hi, Alison. She is the Claims Relationship and Governance Manager at CHU. Now, today, in respect to housekeeping, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And we actually have Cara McInnes, who's a National Claims Service Manager, who most of you probably know, who will come back to you and come back to everyone and put it in the chat. Now, this webinar will attract SCA and ANZIIF CPD points, and you'll be sent within the next 2 weeks a certificate and a copy of the recording and links to all previous webinar recordings, which you can use for training of your people. So please share that amongst your company and let everyone know that that is available resource to them. We also have a survey, which we hope you'll all respond to, giving feedback and ideas for future webinars. Now, in the spirit of reconciliation, CHU acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which we live and work throughout Australia, and their continuing connection to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Now, today, I just want to, before we get into the agenda, I just want to let you know a little bit about CHU very quickly. Now, we have over 1 million properties protected. So we've got about 50% of the strata insurance market. So we're obviously very, very experiencing in managing claims. So when you see a fire on the news, generally there is a 50-50 chance it is ours when it is a strata building. We also have a 24/7 claims process and emergency hotline where you'll find available on our website when your clients need it most. We're also here for the long haul. So last year we celebrated our 45-year anniversary, having written the first residential strata plan in Australia back in 1978. Now, CHU has a broad range of products, which you can see on the left. And we also have another AFSL license with Flex Insurance to offer more flexible product offering. Now, you can obtain quotes and manage the full cycle of processing on StrataTech, and it's obviously quicker to self-service. You can also view the most current position of your claims through StrataTech Claims View. So you don't need to call us to get this information, as it's at your fingertips 24 hours a day. Now, this is a great benefit as it's quicker, and it just benefits greatly, especially when things like those cats happen, when everyone is so busy. We also have 3 companies under CHU services. So we've got CHU Assess, CHU Consult, CHU Inspect. Now, for more information, please contact your state BDM that can help you in more detail. So today, I'll cover off the items you see above, discussing the weather patterns and how it relates to insurance, and most importantly, how to prepare for all types of weather conditions. So looking at the all-important risk management piece, what to do when disaster strikes, and strata cover for weather events. Now, Alison will provide you with a real treat by looking into some of the claims case studies. All right. So yeah, letting you know the learnings from certain cat events. So let's look at the severe weather outlook for the 2024-25 period.
Severe weather can develop quickly and threaten lives and property. You can reduce the impact by getting ready before it happens. Every year, October to April is Australia's peak time for severe thunderstorms, tropical cyclones, flooding, heat waves and bushfires. Know your weather, know your risk. Let's take a closer look at some of the impacts of severe weather so you can be prepared. Severe thunderstorms are more common during the warmer months, bringing heavy rainfall, damaging winds, and the risk of flooding. While they can be experienced anywhere in Australia, the biggest risk for severe thunderstorms is along the east coast, including northern New South Wales and southern Queensland. There's also a significant risk through inland Western Australia and across the tropical north. While tropical cyclones can form at any time, our official tropical cyclone season is between November and April. While we usually have around 4 tropical cyclones cross Australia's coast in a year, we've always had at least one in every year since the 1970s. Last season, we had 8 tropical cyclones in the region and 4 crossed Australia's mainland: Jasper, Kirrily, Lincoln and Megan. While the number, location and intensity of tropical cyclones varies every year, any tropical cyclone almost always brings damaging winds, heavy rainfall and flooding. Floods can happen anywhere in Australia. Last season, widespread flooding affected large areas across the country, including Queensland, the Northern Territory, Victoria, New South Wales and Western Australia, some of which was caused by rainfall from ex-tropical cyclones. Riverine and localised flash flooding is more common during the severe weather season, particularly across northern and eastern parts of the country. There's always a risk of dangerous and destructive fires in Australia in the warmer months. Fire authorities are advising an increased fire risk for parts of Queensland, the Northern Territory, Western Victoria and the southeast corner of South Australia during spring. Towards summer, the increased fire risk may extend to more southern areas, as it only takes a few warm and windy days to dry out fuel loads. If you live in a high-risk area, now is the time to prepare your home and property. Review and update your emergency plans and create your emergency kits.
Awesome. Now that's some great advice from Bom there, and especially know your weather, know your risks. Now, the Australian Bureau of Meteorology long-range forecast, what it does say is that the 2024-25 Australian tropical cyclone season, it's expected to be like the long-term average, which typically is 11 tropical cyclones form in the Australian region and 4 cross the coast average each year. Now, the likelihood of severe, strong tropical cyclones is higher than average because of the warmer than average ocean temperatures forecast for the Australian region in the coming months. Now, under the prevailing neutral climate conditions, the first tropical cyclone across the Australian coast typically occurs in late December. Now, last year we had it form in mid-December with Jasper. Okay, now you've probably seen this slide before because we have shown it on a number of our previous webinars, and it shows the increase in catastrophes and the severity, especially in that last 10 to 15 years. Yeah, there's a lot more colour and there's some quite large high bars there. Now, remember 2 years ago, we had one of the largest events on record at over $6 billion for that rain flood event in southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales. Fortunately, the last 2 years, the CAT events have been lower, but as you can see, and it's been flooding in those last 2 years too. There's been more of that that's continued, but it's unpredictable, as we've seen in Florida with the 2 recent large hurricanes that occurred. Now, this is taken from the Insurance Catastrophe Resilience Report 23-24 that shows the cost of extreme weather in Australia is rising. So if we average these costs over 3 decades and adjust for inflation, insurers have actually paid out $2.1 billion a year to policyholders impacted by extreme weather events. However, if we shorten this period into decades, the cost of extreme weather has grown to the point where over the past 5 years, it's reached an average of $4.5 billion a year. And of course, flood is the main driver of this increase. You can see that from that graph. Now, the trend, clearly shows the cost of all perils except cyclone are growing. Okay, flood is growing at the quickest. The average annual cost of flood alone jumped from $620 million over the 30-year average to $2.2 billion in the past 5 years. And the main factors driving up disaster losses are expanding development and urbanisation. And of course, the upward pressure on premiums from these factors, even before climate change impacts are fully felt, really underscores the urgent need to reform land use planning, improve building standards, and implement programs as property buybacks in the most vulnerable areas. So of course, insurance can't do it alone. So this is just a graph to show of some of the catastrophes we've had over those last 2 years. And fortunately, they've only been 2.19 billion each year, and it was a significant improvement on the $8 billion from the 21-22 period. And as I said, last year's floods played a significant role. It's continued to, and ex-tropical cyclone Jasper and subsequent flooding marked the first major event of the cat season last year. And of course, Alison will discuss this in greater detail and go over some of those key learnings from that event. Now, I've shown this a few times before, and it really shows a famous quote by Benjamin Franklin, who wrote a letter. It was to his own newspaper. He penned his letter, said, protection of towns from fire. So there was a bushfire raging on the town, and it began with the expression, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Then he wrote about how a city should actually prepare itself for the fire. Now, it remains relevant today. So whilst we've had a couple of good years, whether you're a client, strata manager, broker, or even an insurer, it's important that we don't become complacent when it comes to the weather. Risk management, highly important. So the main thing is to look after yourself first. So I guess it's a bit like, you're on a plane, the plane loses pressure, put the oxygen mask on before the children, okay? You need to have a business continuity plan in place, test it, etc. Now, you need that because you need to know what is going to happen, if your brokerage or your strata management firm is impacted by that same event. So your people can't get into work, have to prioritise their home over work. How are you actually going to look after your clients? And it's important, with them, employee assistance programs are very important, okay? Because when that event occurs, the pressure goes up significantly. People might be running on adrenaline for the first couple of weeks, but then they might do it really tough after that. You just can't keep it up. So, really look at what you're offering from that mental health and welfare perspective for your people, okay? And now with CHU, for our brokers and strata managers and also our clients, you do have access to the employee assistance program if you need it. Now, if you'd like to explore this further, please make contact with your business development manager. Now, it's important to prepare for these weather events. So tropical cyclones, they can, the gale force winds, the cyclones, they can put pressure on the building structures, particularly the windows. And they can also cause secondary damage by dislodging trees and branches and turning loose items into dangerous missiles. So regular maintenance on the property and gardens will help reduce the risk. So couple of practical tips: cut back trees and overhanging branches if they pose a risk of falling and damaging the building, and advise the building's occupants to secure any items on balconies or in yards. Now, if you're in a cyclone area, have a building practitioner inspect your property prior to the cyclone season. Is obviously better, which is typically about to start 1st of November to the 30th of April. Now, severe thunderstorms, again, just cut back trees and overhanging branches, clear gutters and downpipes, and check roofing and window seals. Now, a few things to consider for properties in areas that are prone to flood is to keep contents and appliances out of areas that are at risk of flooding. Encourage residents and businesses in units at or below ground level to lift those valuable items and electrical equipment off the floor. Now, when there is a possibility of major flooding, strata committees should at least know where they can access sandbags in an emergency. If they don't have barriers on hand already, they should know where to access it, those sandbags. Now, contact the local state emergency service for help, also important. If you have any areas, if you're in an area that may have bushfire exposure, then cut back trees and overhanging branches, clear those gutters of leaves and twigs, and repair or cover gaps in external walls or windows. Now, it's important for a strata committee to have a risk management plan. So they want to be proactive rather than reactive. So you should know what your greatest exposures are. For example, Northern Australia can have, and lower can have different concerns. Okay, so yeah, know your weather. So North Queensland, we know that North Queensland gets the wind and the rain, but lower, Southeast Queensland, for example, or lower doesn't get the wind as bad, but it certainly gets the rain. But of course, that's not to say that a cyclone can't hit Brisbane. Okay, we've certainly seen cyclones go low, and just a few years ago we had one in WA at the same latitude. Now, Cyclone Debbie, it hit around Hamilton Island and Airlie Beach, and it certainly smashed that Hamilton Island area from that wind direction, and it certainly had quite a bit of rain. Now, following this, it also had it became an ex-tropical cyclone or low, and it drenched the Gold Coast and Lismore. So insurers will prepare for two different perils. They'll prepare for the wind, and they'll also prepare for the rain events that occur after. Also, based on what we see more hail events in the south. We've seen obviously Southeast Queensland, we've seen that in Newcastle had a decent one in 2023, and Canberra had one a few years earlier. And of course, hail comes in a narrow line like a runway, and when it hits that metal roof, it'll dent that metal roof, but it can also block your gutters. Therefore, you get water coming in the building, and it also impacts air conditioners and can damage your solar panels. So it's important to focus on where you're most vulnerable. So make sure you review your insurance coverage and the building valuation. So we know that throughout Australia, it needs to be like every 5 years that you get a valuation. To be honest, it probably should be more frequent than that, like every 3 years. And following COVID, etc., there was certainly some the event we had a couple of years ago, we saw significant inflation, especially that we've only been increasing our sums insured by about 4%. So there could be underinsurance out there, but to ensure that isn't occurring, please get your valuations, push for more frequent valuations so that people are adequately insured. Also, make sure that the building maintenance is regular and ongoing. So insurance has exclusions around defects and maintenance. So a strata policy, of course, is not a maintenance policy. And we know there is an issue with insurance affordability and availability, and the poorly managed ones will be the ones impacted the most. Okay, so please remember, an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. The body corporate, they should also have an emergency plan in place. So develop and communicate an emergency plan for your community. So this should include like evacuation procedures. So establish clear evacuation routes and assembly points within your complex. Have emergency contacts, share a list of important contacts, including local authorities with all the residents. Have good communication channels, so implement a system for quickly disseminating storm warnings and updates to all residents. Consider using mobile phone apps or text alerts for instant communication. And of course, have an emergency kit. So encourage residents to prepare a personal emergency kit containing essentials like water, non-perishable food, flashlights, and first aid supplies. And of course, seek help from professionals as required. Now, a good maintenance schedule is very important. So, it's important to get into the mentality of being prepared So it minimises the potential for water damage to come into the property. So water damage is where the majority of our claims actually come from. So check and clear gutters, drains, downpipes and balconies. So these need to be in good condition, free of rust and holes, and because large volumes of rainwater needs to travel down the gutters and downpipes. If they're blocked, they can backfill and flood that roof cavity. Of course, replace any deteriorating silicon on the windows and roof. This is often a common cause of claims. Now, a roof inspection should pick this up for the roof. Yeah, silicon deteriorates and, of course, has a limited lifespan. So check the roofs, especially on older buildings, for waterproofing capabilities to prevent seepage into ceiling and wall cavities. Ensure tiles and roof sheeting are secure because they not only cause leaks, but they can be dangerous flying debris in high winds. So roofs should be checked before and after event because we've seen many times when people have not been aware of hail damage to the roofs and then they've picked this up months later when someone's actually got on the roof and has seen the dents. So yeah, have someone come out and do a roof inspection. It could be extremely beneficial and it's actually not that expensive either. And it can save a lot of money in the long run. Now, tiled roofs, they can also be a problem during a storm. Large hailstorms can smash through the tiled roofs, letting the elements in to damage ceilings and walls. Now, also check drainage systems, including stormwater and flood inlet grates in basements and underground car parks to ensure they can handle those sudden deluges. And upgrade the building envelope. So windows are also an area of vulnerability as ceiling can deteriorate over time, creating an open invitation to water. Check the ceiling and replace if necessary. Ensure your window frames and timber fascias are in good condition. So if the paint is peeling, repaint it because any water that's exposed will just soak into the frame. And of course, keep loose items like pool and garden furniture secured so they don't fly off in high winds. Now we want to look at what to do if disaster strikes, okay? So first and foremost, ensure everyone is safe and accounted for and seek emergency support if needed. Now, once it's safe and the event is over, inspect all public areas on the property. Of course, your safety and everyone else's safety is paramount. Stay away from any dangers, power lines, broken glass, etc. Now, you need to understand, of course, what is damage to your lots, what emergency works needs to be undertaken so that you can address anything that is urgent and not urgent. Triage what is urgent and what is not urgent. Of course, tarps and storm seals can dramatically decrease resultant damage, so it's important those make safes are important. And of course, notify the insurer and commence the claims process. All right, it's okay to dispose of damaged items if being coordinated by councils. Okay, so keep a sample of any material rather than the entire item, or take photos of the damage and the debris. And most important is to keep open the lines of communication, the insured and the strata manager and or the broker, and of course your insurer and the loss adjuster appointed. So all successful claims have open lines of communication with all those parties. So very, very important that is, to keep those lines of communication open. Now, the CHU residential strata insurance, it covers the building and common property against sudden and accidental damage and not wear and tear over time. Now, the largest number of declines for insurance actually applies to maintenance related claims. So, of course, strata insurance is not a maintenance or defects policy. So if you haven't maintained your roof and it rusts, or if it's defects within the construction, there are exclusions in the policy to exclude these type of claims. So if you're aware you have cracked tiles or rusted roof, etc., then the insured needs to be getting these fixed to prevent loss. Now, when a catastrophe happens, like the rain event, a couple of years ago, that actually cost the industry $6 billion. What happens is it significantly pushes up the prices of materials and labour. Okay, so this cat cover protects you from those increases. So you can choose from 15% to 30% increase to that building sum insured. Okay, that is going to, it's when it is a total loss, it's going to increase it by that amount. Now, it must be a declared catastrophe. Okay, it must be something like a bushfire, natural event, like a bushfire, floods, widespread hailstorm, cyclones, etc., that is impacting a number of people. Of course, a house fire, it's only impacting, one group of people. It's not considered a catastrophe. It needs to be declared by the Insurance Council of Australia. Now we'll pass on to Alison Bell to discuss claims examples. Now, welcome, Alison.
Thanks, Greg. Can I get you to move the screen a couple of pages, please? Sorry, Craig's in control, so I'll be asking him to change the pages as we go. Thanks, Greg. So as Craig mentioned, I'm Alison Bell. I'm the Claims Relationship and Governance Manager at CHU. As he also mentioned, we're going to go through some case studies, but first we decided that we would show you through some of our preparation in relation to an event, as we've done a lot of talking about what you guys should do so far. So I'm going to talk you through Cyclone Jasper that happened in December 23. Now, this event turned out to be small by industry standards, with the entire industry receiving around 10,140 claims, with an incurred cost of 384 million in damage. Just to put that into comparison, an event that happened a couple of weeks later in Southeast Queensland and New South Wales. Wasn't Southeast Queensland. Sorry, it happened a couple of weeks later, was 102,000 claims with 1.5 billion damage incurred. And then a bigger comparison was the Southeast Queensland and New South Wales floods in 2022. With 245,000 claims and around $6.3 billion in damages. So as I said, this was a pretty small event in comparison, but we still had to prepare in anticipation for what could end up happening. Okay, can I get you to put the next page up, please? So this is an extract from a local newspaper. Before the cyclone happened, it gives us an indication of where it's likely to affect. So it's saying that it would be around Cairns and Port Douglas area. However, in the end, it actually hit slightly above there, and it was the rainwater that caused the damage after the event. But this is what we initially used to start mapping out our presentation. Oh, thanks. Yeah, next page, please. So this shows a breakdown of where our policies are. As you can see, we've got around 431 risks in that Cairns area, and that includes Port Douglas. So this let us know the size of what could potentially happen. And next page, please. So this is an extract from an email that we sent to internal stakeholders just before the event occurred. And I'll talk you through what it says in here. So all reports indicated the cyclone would hit landfall around the Port Douglas area, which is where we were focusing our search. There were 125 risks that we had in the Port Douglas area itself. 80 of those properties were buildings and community titles. The remainders were contents and landlords. 636 million had a building sum insured on the property. 2 resorts had the sum insured of as high as 40 million. The biggest had 150 villas in it. We provided an interactive map to the brokers that had claims in that, or had properties in that area, sorry. We had 10 QSS adjusters on standby, 5 Exego adjusters, QInspect was on standby. We had 2 builders with dedicated CHU estimators on standby. Crawford's GTS were in standby in case of any major loss, and our CHU CAT team were well placed to absorb 1,000 claims. So as you can see, even although there was not that much that came out of it, a lot of work went into the preparation, getting the facts, what the worst case scenario could possibly be, and what our immediate plan was once the event hit. Next page, please, Craig. Thanks. We also sent out an external communication to parties that were likely to be affected by the incident, showing how to prepare. given details of phone numbers for the SES, for our claims team, both during business hours and out of business hours, because at that point we didn't know when it was likely to hit, and some details in relation to the cyclone pool. Next page, please, Craig. Thanks. We were then able to look at where our policies were, and we overlaid that in the map shown here. And this is what, as mentioned before, we then sent out to our brokers so that they were able to see where they were affected. Shout out to Chris Fraser here for providing this information. He actually provides this information in every event. And what we can do following this is then, in the case of a cyclone, we can map out where the cyclone hit and what properties were actually affected directly as a result of the event. But we also do this for fires, storms, floods, and any damage that happens too, so we can see exactly where it is damaged. Next page, please. Thank you. So this is just a zoned in view of the same thing, and you can see it right down to the street lines there. Once you hit those green dots on the screen, you can also find out some more information, such as the name of the property, the address, sum insured, and various other information in there to assist with preparation. We can then use that to look at near maps in Google Earth to pinpoint our larger locations from an aerial view. This is a photo of one of the larger losses where there was 146 villas in the one policy. We didn't know if it would be impacted by the event or not, but it gave us an idea of what potentially could happen here. As I mentioned earlier, we had 2 dedicated builders on the ground waiting for the event to happen. On the day after the event, we sent one of the builders out to this property, and you can see those photos down the side of the page. That's from the day after, where it's shown that there was no damage to the property. As you can imagine, that once we then were able to send that to the broker and the strata managers, they'd be quite happy to see that this event has not affected this large property. So this, I also mentioned, was to inspect. We're ready to assist with the event as well. They would go out, take photos, videos of the entire area, which we could then use to provide on to building consultants or engineers, and virtual assessments could be done of these properties. As you can imagine, in some events, it's difficult to get access. It's also difficult with trade availability in some places too. So this is an excellent solution for us to be able to do some virtual assessing with these tools. Thanks. Thank you. So in summary, what did we learn from this event? Prepare, prepare, prepare. Work out what the exposure could look like. What's the potential volume for claims? What's the plan to put it back together and communicate with all relevant stakeholders, and also where available, use technology. Next page, please, Craig. This photo is to do with the Lismore floods that Craig mentioned earlier on. As I also mentioned, we received the industry received 245,000 claims following this event, and it's no wonder based on the photo here. You can just see how much damage has actually happened here. Some of the properties are right up to the roof. And if it wasn't bad enough, a month after this happened, a second flood went through, but not to this level, but more to the level of the 2017 flood that happened before to Lismore. So this is why we prepare. Next page, thank you. This property was actually designed with flood in mind. So the bottom yellow line that you can see was where the flood reached in the 2017 event. The building was designed for that, so water would come into the garages and it could be easily cleaned out with minimal damage. Unfortunately, in that 2022 event, the water did rise a lot higher and went over the balconies and into the residence, which was not how the buildings were designed. So yeah, there was a lot more damage in that 2022 event. Next page, please. Thank you. Unfortunately, this was a typical scene that was seen after the event in Lismore, with people's entire lives on the footpaths, and the residents just had no chance there to protect their belongings. This is where the strata managers and brokers are the first response. You're the ones that the lot owners will call and ask what to do. And as Craig mentioned earlier, this is where we should be taking photos or videos, having inventories of damage, and disposing of items that could be of issue to health or health concerns. Sorry. Next page, thank you. So again, prepare is what we learned from this one. Take photos, rise the furniture as much as possible, prepare inventories, but sometimes, unfortunately, you just can't prepare for the extent of damage that's to come. Page. So this is an example of bushfire in 2019 in the southeast coast of New South Wales. As you can see from the photo, one of the properties is completely damaged and the one right next to it is completely untouched. This property, there was 7 in the lot and 4 of the 7 were destroyed, and the neighbouring properties were destroyed also. Going back to what Craig mentioned earlier, make sure you clean gutters, because it could be the difference between a building being affected or not. This picture is just a photo of the repairs midway, and they've been completely demolished. Next page, please, Craig. And here's a photo of it back put together. This property, the sum insured for the property was 3.4 million. The cost to rebuild 4 of the 7 properties was 2.75 million. So it's likely if one more property was to have been damaged, the sum insured would have been exhausted. So when a property is adequately insured, we can do a great job of rebuilding the property. However, if it's underinsured, this poses difficult questions for all involved, the strata manager, the broker, and ourselves. Also note these figures that I mentioned are pre-COVID, so the costs have increased a lot to today's standards. Next page. Thank you. This photo is actually not a CHU risk, but it was taken from a local press. So all 6 townhouses are destroyed, as you can see. The property was underinsured by around $1 million, which meant that the lot owners would have to raise that $1 million before these properties could be reinstated. As you can imagine, that's not a conversation you want to be having after such a traumatic event already. So it just, again, highlights the importance of making sure that those sums insured are adequate before events happen. Next page, please. So in summary, whilst a number of strata buildings aren't at high risk of bushfires, we do still have properties in these areas. So have an emergency plan, make sure some insureds are reviewed so that there's no underinsurance. And as Kate mentioned earlier in the presentation, take the steps to prepare for such events. Next page. This is our final case study, and this highlights the complications of what we have to deal with, have to deal with regularly in strata. And it's some things that the rest of the industry don't really appreciate. So this property is storm and flood event that happened in 2022. The property consisted of 20 townhouses, and the policy excluded flood. 45 of the lots were water damaged. And we initially got a hydrologist to attend the property, and their initial determination for the damage was flood, which would have meant all 45 lots being declined. However, on further investigation, we found that some units were flood damaged only, others had rainwater entry to the garage before floodwater inundated the entire residence. Others had rainwater entry to the garage around and ground floor before the floodwaters inundated the residence. So this made conversations with the lot owners a bit tricky, as some properties were partially covered, some were fully declined. True Consult were involved in this and worked with the loss adjusters and also attended EGMs. And the CHU claims team worked with the brokers and strata managers to give individual outcomes to each affected party. There were some delays in this claim while we came up with a solution, and unfortunately AFCA did end up being contacted about some of these delays. However, if this was a domestic property, there would have been 45 separate hydrologists attending the properties. And if we'd went with the initial determination of the hydrologist, all 45 lots wouldn't have been covered as there was no flood cover. So although it did take time, we did work together and we got the best outcome for all parties involved. This is just another view of the same property, and I'll go through the different blocks to tell you what the damage is here. So block 1, which is the light green area at the bottom left of the page, the clubhouse was damaged only, and there was no other areas of damage there. Block 2, which is the dark green beside it, was all flood damage and not covered. Block 3, which is the pink area, was garage only damage. Block 4 is the blue area and had 40 mils of storm water in the house and 170 mils in the garage. On block 5, the orange area, it was only the garages that were damaged. Block 6, which is the purple area, was flood damage, therefore not covered. And in block 7, the maroon area down the bottom had water lapping at the garages, but nothing entered. I show you this to show you the complications of what's covered versus not covered. Could you imagine being in that lot 2, which is a green area, and you've got no cover, it's flood only, but then you cross the road to the blue area and you've got cover up to 40 mils in the house and 170 mils in the garage being covered, and you're covered under the same insurance policy. This then was further had further complications, because obviously you've got meetings, you're talking about these different things that are happening, and wondering why one person's getting covered where the other isn't. So this is just shows some other important facts about what makes it more complicated for strata and these type of events. So in summary for this one again, what we learned with this one was to communicate. That's the key here. That working together can provide the best outcome for all of us. And that strata is complicated, and that's why we do what we do. And that's why we rely on everyone that's involved to deliver an outcome here. Next page. And that's us came to the end of the presentation, but I think we've got a couple of questions that have been popping into the chat. So give me a minute, I'll get them. We've got a question here that says, why didn't we just wait until we found out what the damage was before preparing? I'm assuming that relates to Cyclone Jasper. And on this occasion, we could have waited, because obviously it ends up not coming to much in the end. However, we didn't know that at the time, so it's better to be prepared than not prepared. And as we saw in the other events, it could have actually been much more damage. So yeah, better to be prepared than not is the thought here. And another question, let me see. Okay, so every event there's issues with builders. What are we doing to combat that? So we've recently implemented data, which will assist us in managing builders' KPIs. We can see fully from that system when a builder accepts a job, when they attending site, how long it will take for scope of works to be sent back to us, and we've got the ability to turn on and off the builders at a drop of a hat, basically, with that system. So yeah, we should be able to not have any further complications in terms of builders' capacity. Do we have? I don't think we've got anything else here. Okay. If we've not answered any of the questions that you've got so far, we'll within the chat, we'll be able to come back to you in an email at a later date with regards to that. But otherwise, that's for all for now. Thanks. So thanks to everyone, and we'll see you next time.